reaffirmed their commitment to dialogue with North Korea and to the regime's denuclearization, but sanctions, Trump says, it will stay. Kim Jong-un re-elected on Thursday as North Korea's most powerful official. Some changes to a few other top posts, though, bringing in a new generation. And the World Trade Organization rules that Korea's ban on marine products from radioactive waters in Japan is okay and not a violation of trade rules. It's 4 p.m. on this Friday. Thanks for tuning in to our afternoon broadcast. I'm Devin Whiting. So Presidents Moon and Trump have agreed to keep dialogue going with North Korea's Kim Jong-un in the hope of getting him to denuclearize. But until he does that, Trump says sanctions will remain in place. Our Shin Se-min reports from Washington.
No change on sanctions, but the door to dialogue with the North remains open. U.S. President Donald Trump sitting across from President Moon Jae-in in the White House, reiterating his view that sanctions against the regime have to stay in full force. However, he said channels of communication should stay open with Pyongyang as they work toward the regime's full and final denuclearization. President Trump said the hardline policy toward the North should also extend to halt joint projects between the two Koreas until Pyongyang makes good on its promises.
How much do you support my president's push for economic concessions, which includes the resumption of the joint inter-Korean industrial complex and perhaps even the...
Well, at the right time, I would have great support. This isn't the right time, but at the right time, I'd have great support.
He added sanctions to pressure North Korean leader Kim Jong-un are at a level that's fair. Asked if he would take a smaller deal to keep the talks going, the U.S. president said he'd have to see what the deal is, as there are various smaller deals that could happen. But in the meantime, President Trump said he's looking to strike a big deal with the regime, which means the complete eradication of the North's nuclear program. During the first real indication of how the North Korea nuclear talks will proceed in the aftermath of the Hanoi summit, Presidents Moon and Trump agreed that every step taken is a step forward.
그래서 이제 그 중요한 것은 대화의 모멘텀을 계속 유지시켜 나가고 또 가까운 시일 내에 제3차 북미회담이 열릴 수 있으리라는 그런 전망을 세계에 심어주는 것이 중요하다고 생각합니다.
The two allies also cemented their stances that their top-down approach is the key to denuclearizing the Korean peninsula. Amid the fine-tuning to reach the end goal of a nuclear-free Korean peninsula, the door to progress still remains open, including at the next summit meeting between leaders Kim and Trump, and even a three-way summit with President Moon Jae-in, all of which depends on when and how the North Korean leader makes his next move. Shin Se-min, Arirang News, Washington.
Now, before the summit, President Moon met with other top U.S. officials, some of them known to be hardliners on North Korea. But they, too, agreed that the door to dialogue will stay open. Park Hee-jun reports.
President Moon Jae-in has stressed the importance of restarting talks between North Korea and the U.S. as quickly as possible. Ahead of his summit with U.S. President Donald Trump, President Moon met with Vice President Mike Pence at the White House on Thursday and reaffirmed the close alliance between Seoul and Washington. He said the Hanoi summit was just part of the process leading to North Korea's denuclearization, and he promised to do everything possible to achieve peace and denuclearization on the Korean peninsula. Pence said the U.S. will keep its positive stance with North Korea and keep the door open for dialogue. He also said he is hopeful the U.S. can restart talks with the North. President Moon also sat down with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and National Security Advisor John Bolton, key U.S. negotiators leading the dialogue with North Korea. President Moon said it's crucial to achieve results through top-down diplomacy and expressed confidence that it will be possible. Appreciating the effort Pompeo and Bolton are putting in to achieve peace and denuclearization on the Korean peninsula, President Moon asked for their continued cooperation with their South Korean counterparts. Pompeo and Bolton promised to keep talks going with North Korea at various levels. Park Hee-jun, Arirang News.
Now, the leaders of South Korea and the U.S. also touched upon the issue of sharing the costs of stationing American troops on the peninsula. Asked whether he's considering a long-term arrangement instead of the current one-year deal, President Trump said that they are talking about long-term. He hailed America's extraordinary relationship with South Korea, saying Washington is always thinking long-term with Seoul. Still, it's unclear whether Trump meant he'd sign a longer agreement next time when he was the one who insisted on a one-year deal last time rather than a 5-year deal. The allies agreed earlier this year to increase the amount Seoul pays by 8.2% to some $920 million. The newly elected members of North Korea's Supreme People's Assembly had their first meeting on Thursday, where they re-elected Kim Jong-un as chairman of the regime's powerful State Affairs Commission. No surprise there, perhaps, but there were some changes in the cabinet and in the parliament. Oh Jung-hee reports.
Reshuffles in North Korea's power structure, but one in which Kim Jong-un maintains his solid grip on power. North Korea's Supreme People's Assembly, the regime's rubber stamp parliament that was newly formed last month, held its first meeting on Thursday, Pyongyang state-run Korean Central News Agency reports. Kim Jong-un was re-elected as the chairman of the State Affairs Commission, the North Korean government's top policy-making body. Those deeply involved in nuclear negotiations with the U.S., the top negotiator Kim Yong-chol, Foreign Minister Lee Yong-ho, and Vice Foreign Minister Choi Sun-hee all became members of the State Affairs Commission. And North Korea replaced its premier of the cabinet from Park Bong-ju to Kim Jae-ryong. But what's noteworthy is Choi Ryong-hae's rise. He earned 2 major positions, each in the government and the parliament. With Kim Yong-nam stepping down from his role as president of the parliament's presidium, Choi Ryong-hae is now in charge of that. At the same time, the North's newly created post of the first vice chairman of the State Affairs Commission was handed to Choi as well.
There are major changes in North Korea's governing structure, but it seems seniors are leaving and a generational shift is taking place. North Korea's State Affairs Commission is also expanding its size by creating the first vice chairman post and increasing its members.
Pyongyang state-run media says North Korea modified its constitution but didn't disclose the details. And North Korea's parliament echoed the ruling party's decision earlier this week that the country will have to build a self-supporting economy. The Supreme People's Assembly meeting is continuing on Friday. It's the first time in 19 years that North Korea is holding its parliamentary meeting for more than a day. Oh Jung-hee, Arirang News.
Martial artists from South and North Korea put on a joint Taekwondo performance on Thursday in Switzerland as part of their European tour. The show marked the 25th anniversary of Taekwondo becoming an Olympic sport. The performers were from the South Korean organization World Taekwondo and North Korea's International Taekwondo Federation. And demonstrating their skills, they broke wooden boards and bricks and performed the patterns of defense and attack motions known in Korean as pumse. On Friday, they're scheduled to perform at the United Nations in Geneva. Big news in the K-pop world today. The boy band BTS are releasing a much-anticipated new album less than 2 hours from now. It's already a bestseller thanks to pre-orders, and the boys are taking their new songs on a global tour. Our Won Jung-hwan reports.
Today is the day K-pop fans around the world have been waiting for. South Korean idol group BTS will return to the music scene with the release of their new album Map of Seoul, Persona. The boy band plan to release the new album globally at 6 p.m. Korean time on Friday. But even before its release, the album has shown it will be a big hit, having topped Amazon's online store CDs and vinyls sales since pre-orders began almost a month ago. The music video for the new album's intro track, Persona, uploaded in late March, has more than 29 million YouTube views so far, while the first teaser for the main track, Boy With Love, got 26 million views in less than 5 days after its release on Monday. And to promote the new album to a global audience, the band left for the US on Wednesday night to premiere their new tracks on NBC's Saturday Night Live this weekend. Following their album release, the band will continue their Love Yourself, Speak Yourself World Stadium Tour in May, traveling to Los Angeles, São Paulo, London, Paris, and Osaka. Meanwhile, another global K-pop sensation, Blackpink, is also making history. Besides seeing their music video for Kill This Love reach 100 million YouTube views in a record time, Blackpink will be the first all-girl K-pop group to take to the stage at Coachella in its 20-year history when they perform at the music festival in California this Friday local time. To show its support to the group, YouTube announced it will be broadcasting their performance live on the big screen at Times Square in New York City. 원정환, 아리랑 뉴스.
Back in 2015, Japan filed a complaint with the WTO, arguing against South Korea's ban on imports of Japanese marine products from areas including Fukushima, the site of the terrible nuclear disaster 8 years ago. Korea lost the first ruling in February last year, but today it won the bulk of its appeal. Our Kim Hae-sung reports.
South Korea has won its appeal at the World Trade Organization over its dispute on import bans on Japanese seafood. Following the Fukushima nuclear disaster in 2011, the Korean government slapped a temporary import ban on Japanese food. It then extended the ban to all fishery products from 8 Japanese prefectures around Fukushima in 2013 and enacted additional testing requirements. In 2015, Tokyo filed a complaint with the WTO against the restrictions. After siding with Japan in its first ruling in 2018, the WTO said in its final ruling that South Korea's measures were not overly restrictive and did not unfairly discriminate against Tokyo.
The government welcomes the WTO's final ruling. Since losing the first ruling, we formed a dispute response team with various related ministries to come up with follow-up measures. We believe the final ruling is a reflection of our efforts. With the WTO ruling, all existing import bans on Japan will stay in place.
In a statement, Japanese Foreign Minister Taro Kono said the WTO's ruling was regrettable and said Tokyo wants negotiations with Seoul to end the restrictions. Since the import ban in 2011, Japanese seafood imports to South Korea have fallen from over 70,000 tons to around 20,000 tons a year. According to Japan's Ministry of Health, Labor and Welfare, after inspecting 170,000 agricultural and fishery products last year, 18% of its agricultural goods and 7% of its fishery goods were found to contain radioactive cesium.
When it comes to radioactive materials, there's no such thing as safe thresholds. Just a slight exposure to cesium can cause cancer. Cesium from Japanese seafood in the 8 prefectures was 9 times higher than permissible levels. That's not safe at all.
Around 50 countries across the world, including China, have some sort of ban on Japanese food imports in place since 2011. Kim Hae-sung, Arirang News.
And it's time now on this Friday to get a wrap-up of the market action this week. And for that, we have on the line Dr. Kim Se-wan, professor of economics at Ewha Women's University. Thanks for making time today, Dr. Kim.
Good afternoon.
Well, as we just heard, the WTO has ruled in favor of Korea in that dispute with Japan, where Korea had banned marine products from areas like Fukushima, where radiation had leaked out when the tsunami struck. Now, the WTO said the ban is not a case of unfair trade restrictions. So what does this mean for the two countries' trade relations going forward?
I think overall there is no huge impact because of this WTO's decision in favor of Korean side. Actually, Japanese fisheries export has been increasing over 20% in last year. So Japanese government wanted to make a clear declaration that Fukushima is like a radiation contamination-free region after winning WTO's decision. Because of that, Japanese government's disappointment is kind of very huge this time. But it is very important to ban Fukushima fisheries import because of the possible radiation contamination. So I believe it is not unfair trade act, which is against the Japanese government argument.
Okay, yeah. So perhaps because their exports are rising elsewhere, they can take a blow here. But
Right.
Changing gears a little bit, this week in Wall Street, stocks were down in part because of the back and forth on Brexit. European markets in the red too. So what happened overall this week in Korea and globally?
Well, the global equity market has a big impact from two issues of conflicts on tariffs between U.S. and EU member countries, and IMF decreased forecast on global economic growth. Because of that, global equity market has been declined in a larger scale, particularly on last Thursday. But in the case of South Korean equity market, compared to Monday's Kospi index, today's index has been increased over 1%. So Korean equity market has been pretty good because of the positive views on China-U.S. trade talks and possible global economic recoveries. Yes.
Right, and well, staying here in Korea, the finance ministry, their recent green book was showing some improvements in terms of production, investment, consumption, and so on. But still, there are these major concerns more broadly about exports. That's driven by semiconductors declining there. How are exports looking this month and going forward?
Well, as you know, Green Book represents Korean government's official view on current Korean economic situation. So according to the Green Book, in the last month, March, Korean government pretty much emphasized the positive momentum from consumption investment and GDP growth. But in this month, April's Green Book, they are saying that the risk on export is increasing. That means the largest export item, which is chips export, is declining quickly. And it doesn't look that, as of now, global economic recovery is near. And the Brexit problem is still causes many problems in EU member countries and our export to EU member countries. So I believe that Korean government will end the discussion with the supplementary budget increase. The needs of this supplementary budget increase will be emphasized.
Right. Well, now on the other side of the world, we had the summit in Washington, D.C. on Thursday. That was overnight here in Korea. Presidents Moon and Trump there. Did that have any effect at all on markets?
Well, I believe that to some meeting agenda was pretty much focused on North Korean issues. So to summit meetings' effects on global and domestic equity market is, I think, limited this time. But in the long run, we can say that the lessening and weakening the tension between U.S., UK, U.S., North Korea, and Japan would give a positive, of course, momentum on domestic equity market.
Sure thing. Well, we're going to have to leave it there today, Dr. Kim. Thanks, as always, for your insights.
Thank you very much.
Now, South Korea's export prices rose for the second month in a row in March. The Bank of Korea says the export price index came to 83.36. That's up 0.5% from February and marks the biggest on-month jump since last July. The central bank attributed the rise to the higher $1 exchange rate and higher prices of petroleum products. Dubai crude had risen on month by almost 4%. Semiconductor prices, though, continue to fall for the 8th consecutive month. The head of the IMF is warning that the global economy, which is already stuck in rather slow growth, could slow down even more because of unnecessary trade disputes. Lee Seung-jae tells us more.
Addressing some of the world's biggest economic issues at the annual spring meetings on Thursday, IMF Managing Director Christine Lagarde said 70% of the global economy is trapped in a growth slowdown that could get progressively worse.
Global economy is also currently quite uncertain. As I said, a year ago, we were talking about synchronized growth, and 75% of the global economy was going through that phase. As you heard a couple of days ago, we're now talking about synchronized slowdown by 70% of the global economy. We need to better address unfair trade practices and distortions in the system, including through a WTO system reform. And we need to avoid self-inflicted wounds, including tariffs and other barriers.
Citing heightened trade tensions, the IMF downgraded its overall global forecast for growth this year. The fund expects global growth to decelerate from 3.6% last year to 3.3% in 2019, the weakest since 2016. Lagarde also took on Brexit, saying the delay of Britain's divorce from the EU avoids the terrible outcome of a no-deal Brexit that would further pressure the global economy. She also touched upon a progressive economic doctrine called the modern monetary theory that's drawing attention in the U.S. Lagarde says the doctrine isn't a panacea, but admitted it may help fight deflation. The modern monetary theory rose to mainstream attention in the 1990s and has sparked debate among politicians and economists over the idea that government deficits aren't as dangerous as it's usually thought for sovereign nations that borrow in their own currency so it can't go broke. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
It looks like it'll be hard for South Korea and 7 other countries to keep their exemptions from America's sanctions on Iran. A South Korean foreign affairs official was cited today as saying the U.S. is taking a tougher stance now and is not looking to waive the sanctions for anyone. And even if it does, the source said the amount of imports allowed would be cut dramatically. The sanctions, he said, have worked better than expected on Iran and haven't had much of an impact on oil prices. Seoul says, though, that it will continue asking for an exemption, especially since it's not importing crude oil, but condensate or ultralight oil, which is technically not the sanctions target. The current exemption is set to end on May 3rd. Korea's temporary tax break on fuel, which was supposed to end on May 6th, will be extended by 4 months until the end of August. According to the Finance Ministry, the fuel tax cut will, however, be reduced to 7% from the current 15%. The financial authorities say the extension is to help ease the burden of rising global oil prices on households and small businesses. The smaller discount means the price of unleaded gasoline starting May 7th will go up by around 6 U.S. cents a liter. Over the next 4 months, the cuts are expected to cause a fall in revenue of around $525 million U.S. The funeral for Hanjin Group chairman Cho Yang-ho, who helped turn Korean Air into a global airline, began today and will last for the next 5 days. Korean Air said the body of the late chairman was moved to Seoul's Yonsei Severance Hospital early in the morning. Cho died in Los Angeles on Sunday from a chronic lung disease. Politicians and business leaders are making their way to the funeral home to pay their respects. Chung Mong-jun, a billionaire with the controlling stake in Hyundai Heavy Industries, and lawmaker Kim Sung-tae have already visited. The repatriation of Cho's body was not made public as his family wants a low-key funeral. He'll be buried on Tuesday at his family's cemetery in Yongin, Gyeonggi-do Province. And that brings us to the end of this newscast. Thanks for watching. More live news coming your way at 7 p.m. Korea time. Bye for now.
South Korea is on the verge of falling off a demographic cliff, with radical changes being forecast in all facets of the country's society, including the labor market and the welfare of its senior citizens.
You think, oh, if I'm poor, I cannot have children.
Raising a family, first they have to think about getting a job, and the unemployment rate is high.
So-called double care. You need to take care of kids, not only kids, but also their parents.
On this week's edition of Foreign Correspondents, we sit down with our panel of journalists to discuss the issues surrounding South Korea's demographic crisis and the possible solutions.